So I just wanted to welcome everyone to this Reach Out and Connect Zoom meeting. We initiated these at the start of lockdown and they've worked really well, I think. Businesses are connecting through this, they're sharing their issues with us, and we indeed are able to take those real grassroots issues and lobby that back into local, regional and national governments. On top of that, we have a resource library on our website and a community board, because as we know, there are a mountain of really good things that people are doing to support the community and getting through these terrible times. So today I'm delighted to welcome both a national minister and a local MP. Paul Scully is the Minister for Small Business, Consumers and the Labour Market, also Minister for London and also MP for Sutton, our neighbouring borough. Stephen Hammond, MP, is our local MP for Wimbledon, as I'm sure you know. I'd also like to welcome all of you as our members and local businesses, and also from Merton Council, the leader, Stephen Allen Brittis, is working to join us. We also have here the Cabinet Member for Regeneration, Councillor Martin Welton, and we'll hear an update from the Council on the work that they have been doing to support businesses after we've heard from Paul Scully and Stephen Hammond. We will also hear from the Chief Executive of Love Wimbledon, Helen Clark-Bell, who will tell us about what's going on in Wimbledon Town Centre. I'd like to also give a warm welcome to the Chair of the Chamber of Commerce, John Merriman, who is a small business owner, and representatives from our patron members, Hartley Fowler and Morrison's solicitors. So just a few points of housekeeping. If we can all remember the mute button, which obviously I didn't, but if you are going to speak, if you can unmute yourself. We have muted you all because obviously there's an awful lot of background noise when there's a lot of participants in these sessions. Now, if you want to make any comments as you hear the Minister or others speak, please use the chat facility. That's in the bar at the bottom of all our photos. We will monitor that and we will share those questions and points as we go through. You can also click on the list of participants and that will show you who is participating. As I said, we're recording this and we'll share this afterwards. So, what a lot of progress over the last week. Lots of new announcements from governments on support for businesses, and we're obviously all very eager to know about a phased approach to reopening businesses. So we're going to hear from Paul Scully first of all. We will then hear from Stephen Hammond, our guest speakers. We will then move into the question and answer session. We have had quite a lot of detailed questions submitted, so I will take those first and then open it up to the audience afterwards. So without further ado, I'd really love to welcome Paul Scully, Minister, to speak. Over to you, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. It's a pleasure to join you. I feel like I've been on Microsoft Teams and Zoom, living virtually for the last few weeks, as we all are, I think. But it's been a while since I've actually got to Merton to anywhere, frankly. But it's nice to connect, as you say, and reaching out. You know, the word unprecedented seems to have been used an unprecedented number of times to describe this pandemic. It's extraordinary times, and the Chancellor said right at the beginning when he laid out his budget, and then there's in a number of press conferences since, that he was going to do whatever it takes. And what we've seen, you're right, Diana, there's been a number of changes in the last week or so, but what you see across the period is we are working day and night, speaking, reaching out to businesses. So for example, after this, I'm speaking to some consumer retail businesses. Wednesday I speak to trade unions, Thursday I speak to non-food retail, Friday is my hospitality day, and I speak to any number of SME groups as well in between all of those. So I'm certainly reaching out, the Secretary of State is, and the Chancellor is as well, to make sure that we can feed back all of the various areas where things are working well, where things aren't working so well, and as Stephen's on on the call because Stephen has just literally just sent me an email about a parliamentary question that he's put in, and I'll get you the answer to that, Stephen. But he's working really hard on your behalf on asking about specific types of businesses and whether they qualify for the discretionary grant, which I'll talk about in a second. But the amount of money that we're spending on the package, the overall support package, is something around the order of £330 billion. It's about 15% of GDP. To put that in perspective, so there's a significant amount of money going into this. But what we realise, you see from the daily press conferences, you see from the numbers, that lives are clearly the government's number one priority. But livelihoods and the economy and businesses, protecting businesses and jobs, has got to be really up there as well, so that we're in a best position possible to try and save as many jobs, to save as many businesses, and be able to bounce back as we start to lift the restrictions, which again I'll touch on in a second. Now, there are a number of things that you can do, as well as having the excellent resources you've got in Merton Chamber, the updates that you'll get from them. But there is a base, we have a regular COVID-19 business bulletin, which you can sign up on gov.uk/coronavirus/business-support. I'll type that up in the chat in a minute. That's gov.uk/coronavirus/business-support. And there's also, we've not long launched a business support finder as well. So you can, if you Google the government's business support finder, there's an easy form that you can fill in that you describe your business, and it will give you the list of the various support schemes that you can have access to. So you don't have to do your own filter. But I think what I found, and I'd be interested to get your views. This is why these sort of calls are really important to me. That the job retention scheme, the software behind it, the actual access to the money, seems to work reasonably well, and a lot of businesses are getting their cash now. So please do let Stephen know if you're not getting, if that's not working for you. Now, clearly, I know with the job retention scheme, with the self-employed scheme, with a number of other, and the rates grant scheme, there are a number of businesses and business people that are falling between the cracks. And what I always try and make sure that we're doing in Bays, but also the business department, but also I know the Treasury is keeping the flexibility, making sure that we are listening, that we can respond. And you've seen that from some of the changes. So we've got the coronavirus business interruption loan scheme, which originally there were two schemes. There's now four, purely and simply because there were too many businesses falling in the cracks. So we had the CBIL scheme, the so-called CBIL scheme, which was supposed to deal with smaller businesses, and the CCFF, which was supposed to deal with very big businesses. But there were some there was that mid-range businesses that weren't investment grade. That didn't fit in there. So we've introduced the coronavirus large business loan scheme, and we've also taken away the turnover cap from there, so that small business and big business can access one of those loan schemes. But what we were also finding is that the banks weren't able to take on the risk of small businesses because of things like the Consumer Credit Act, just the way that their risk appetite was set up. You'll know better than best about banks' appetite for lending at the moment for small businesses, in particular certain sectors, how difficult it is. And so that's why we introduced the Bounce Back Loan Scheme, which is 100% backed by the government. It's maxed out at £50,000 or 25% of turnover, with a maximum of £50,000. There's a really simple form, and most businesses should have their money within days. So that's, again, as I say, from that standing start, we've come to something that should be working for pretty well everybody in terms of the loans. The grant scheme, this actually I always use to illustrate how complicated these situations are. Stephen Algritis will tell you that how I know how hard Merton Council is working to get this money out the door to businesses, the £10,000 for small businesses, or the £25,000 for the retail, hospitality and leisure sector businesses. But you would think that would be pretty easy. Just here's all your businesses. Let's just get them a check for we know whether they qualify or not because they're registered for business rates. That would be fine. But what the councils are doing up and down the country, they're using their business rates software and having to reverse engineer it because their systems are all used to receiving money, not paying out money. And so there's loads of businesses that some they don't know about, some have moved on, some have obviously closed down temporarily. Some they just don't have the bank details because they're paid by check. They don't ever need to share their bank details. So the council is sitting there waiting for grant money to give them grant money, but they can't find them very easily. So there's a lot of resource going in there. That's the easiest one of the schemes to go through. So you can imagine why we're having to, it sometimes takes time to work out these other schemes. And I'm really pleased. So I've been ringing around a lot of local authorities around the country too that are slower at progressing that money out the door. And I'm glad that I haven't had to ring Merton Council. So obviously they're doing a grand job in difficult circumstances. But we've also launched the discretionary grant scheme as well. So we've made up to a maximum of 5% extra on the of the grants that are money that's been allocated to local authorities to primarily go to businesses that are that councils themselves, as well as the business groups, have told us that they really want to reach out to that don't qualify. So maybe some of you are affected by this. If you are paying just rent, an all-in-one rent, which includes rates, so you're not registered for rates. Well, now and there's B&Bs and other organisations. So ones that places in shared workplaces, in incubators, in some industrial parks. Park cafes in Sutton, for example, I know are affected by this. In Worthing Pier, the businesses on Worthing Pier, they pay a single rate. So they will now qualify under the discretion of the local authority. So we've set a bare minimum national criteria as loose as possible to give the local authorities who know their businesses best, because they can liaise with the chamber and other organisations, local organisations, if they don't get that. And actually make sure that those businesses can get the help when they need it. It's no point having it a month down the line, 2 months down the line. Businesses need the help now. I used to run small businesses, so I know how important cash flow is. I think that's probably all I need to say at the moment. I know you've got a load of questions, so it's pointless me just rabbiting onto you. All I will say is why I want you to answer your questions or take away your questions is because the feedback is what helps us develop this scheme. I should actually say, because Diana mentioned it about the lifting of restrictions, what I will say is that there is no light switch moment. We will not get to the date that the scientists tell us is appropriate to lift restrictions, press a button and the economy goes back to normal. We just know that's not going to happen. So I've been working with the business secretary on looking at different workplaces, so offices, factories, working outside, working in people's homes, those kind of areas. We've got 7 streams of work going on there to make sure that we can look at the really technical, granular detail that enables those businesses to be able to have proper guidelines for social distancing. Then we need to look at the sectors as well. Hospitality sector, clearly, those of you that may run restaurants, I don't know if there's anyone on the line, it's very difficult to run a restaurant economically if you're only able to, say, have 30 or 40% of your tables, your covers there. And so these are all things that we get feedback on and we need to work through. So we will make sure that the support, we listen to all the businesses so that the support that is ongoing fits the time appropriately. So I'll leave it there and happy to answer your questions. Thank you, Paul, Minister. And there will be a lot of questions, I think, particularly around the discretionary grant, which has obviously just come on stream. And also, I think there's a big shift, isn't there, from businesses really wanting to address how they get back into business, how they reopen, and that phased approach. And I'm sure we'll hear more about that as we go through. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Stephen Hammond as our local MP for comments. Stephen, welcome.
Thank you, Diana, and welcome everybody. It's a great pleasure to be with you this morning, and this is a new way of working that we're all finding really a very good way of communicating. I guess I want to first of all say thanks and congratulations to the government. I mean, there are any number of things I think they have done that have supported business. The job, Paul's talked about the job retention scheme, various loans, grants, and I think one of the things that has impressed me is that there has been flexibility and reaction through the whole process. Secondly, I think Paul was right to point out that the local council, Merton Council, have done a pretty good job in getting the grant money out. I've had to help a couple of businesses how to fill in forms, but broadly speaking, I think they've done a very good job. My role, as I see it in all of this, is to be available to listen to problems and to feed those back, as Paul said, so that they know where the problems are coming. And secondly, to try and act as the glue, because inevitably in standing up all these schemes, there are a large number of businesses that don't quite fit the criteria, or it's not exactly clear. Initially, I think there was a huge amount of that over how the business rate relief scheme would work. And there was some issue initially about grants. But I'd say we also had a lot of people saying, do I qualify for the job retention scheme? And there have been a number of issues about self-employed, dividend income, and how people pay themselves. And I think that some of those problems that exist, the business rate relief scheme is very important for a number of businesses, but there are a number of anomalies. So if you're in the retail or hospitality sector, you get it, but if you're a supply chain into that, it's sometimes very difficult to prove. And a couple of local businesses that really need help, some of the local hospitality won't be able to stand up if they disappear. Equally, on the high street, opticians get business rate relief, but physiotherapists and osteopaths don't. And again, we had a lot of issues. So I think I understand the MHCLG guidance on this matter, and that relays into the discretionary fund as well, has been, here are the number of industries, but the list is not exhaustive. And a lot of cases, sometimes the local council says, well, it's not on the list, so we can't give relief. And I'm finding that a little bit frustrating at the moment. And I hope that with the new discretionary grant system, I think, as I say, I think the local council have done a pretty good job, and I'm not going to be critical, but I do hope that Martin and Stephen will sit down with officers to look at some of the discretion that is available to them. And I think they can be pretty clear that the government will exercise flexibility and in terms of looking at council's need for money later on. Delighted that we were able to get the bid scheme. I think that's really important for Merton. I was delighted to support that, and I want to thank both the Treasury and MHCLG for recognising how that is important. We've seen how important Love Wimbledon is for Wimbledon, and that being a threat would not have been great news. The final thing, before I know there are a lot of questions, so I won't rabbit on for too much longer, but the only other thing is that I've been doing a lot of work with banks. One of the issues that is coming up, and I suppose a lot of people will have seen it, is the banks have some criteria, and that has changed over the period for all the different types of loans Paul was talking about. But far too often, banks are not treating this in the true spirit at various times. I mean, I know the rate of acceptances has gone up dramatically in the last 2 weeks. But increasingly, if there is a business that is not is sort of perhaps in a transformative path or in a change path rather than just the business going, so if you've shut an office or you've opened an office or you've made major investment, the banks are not using enough knowledge of how business works to say, you could afford to repay this. And I think far too often they're standing behind, you won't be able to repay, rather than looking at the ins and outs of one or two businesses. And I'm particularly, for instance, I spent an hour on the phone with the Barclays local SME lending director to try and persuade them they need to look at this criteria it is inclusive and as wide as possible way. And finally, I heard your point, which is quite right, which is what everybody wants to know, which is when do we get back to new normal, because it will be a new normal as opposed to normal. How long that will take. And just to follow Paul's analogy, I think he said it wasn't going to be an on-off switch. My view is I think it's going to be a dimmer switch where we're turning it on in increments, and that's how we're going to have to phase it. But Diana, the purpose of this session is to allow people to ask questions, so I'm going to finish there.
Thank you so much, Stephen. And I think a thank you to you for making the case for so many local businesses. It really is appreciated, because it is that joint voice, isn't it, that has made, I think, some of the changes come into effect. So we're now going to hear from Merton Council, and Stephen made reference to this. Merton Council actually was in the top 3 councils in London for distributing the grants, so I think some recognition needs to be made for that, and I know it's disappointing that some people don't get them, but we will hear more about this new discretionary grant scheme as we go through. So do we have Stephen Allen-Brittas online now or not? If not, Councillor Welton, would you be able to say a few words?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. There's actually the leader has just joined us. Welcome, Stephen. So I don't know if you heard what I was saying there, but if you are able to give it, great. Well, welcome, and if you are able to give an overview of the council's support for businesses, that would be great. Thank you.
The council can only support small businesses through the government's actions, so we're grateful to the government for what they put in place, and I'm grateful for the acknowledgement by both the Minister and Stephen Hammond that the Merton Council is doing its best to give the grants to small businesses. We're also a landlord, and we've deferred rents to our commercial tenants for 3 months. I think that's important as well to help them out there. With regard to licensing, trading standards and trading areas, we're also suspending license fees there as well. With regard to the bid, and I know both Paul and Stephen complimented the bid, and with regard to the Merton Chamber of Commerce, we as a council are fully supportive, and we're advancing the bid's payments well in advance so that they're able to have the sustenance to help the local small businesses. There was a challenge there from both the Minister and from Stephen Hammond, and that's about the discretion. We will do all we can, Martin and I want to thank Martin for the work he's done for businesses in Merton. We'll do all we can, but we do need assurances from ministers that local authorities will be reimbursed for any discretionary monies that they give out. And sadly, the Minister, Mr. Jenrick, did say today that they'll be tough on refunding councils for work they shouldn't have done. So we need a clear line that we can give discretionary funding and that we will be reimbursed, because at this moment in time, obviously, these are very tough times for local authorities. But as a local authority, we will do all we can first and foremost to help small businesses, and then quibble about it. But hopefully that quibbling will not take too long and will be resolved. So thank you to Merton Chamber of Commerce for putting this in place. We've got a great relationship with both yourselves and with local businesses. The one problem I do see, and I agree with Stephen Hammond, is the banks can be curmudgeonly. I used to work for the Federation of Small Businesses. I was there in the 90s when they were treating small businesses quite abysmally, and you may recall that, Diana, as well. And Barclays Bank, for example, has been slightly slow in the 80% guaranteed loan. Hopefully they'll be quicker with the 100% new one. That's it from me.
Thank you, Stephen. And yeah, we've had a lot of feedback, particularly at the initial stages of the business interruption loan, as to how difficult it was. So, right, let's pass over then and get to where business is actually operating to some extent. So we're going to hear from Helen Clark-Bell from Love Wimbledon about really where we are with Wimbledon Town Centre. Helen, over to you. Welcome.
Thanks, Diana, and hello, everybody. Wimbledon is a pretty sad place at the moment. We spent 8 years building it up and driving footfall, and now it is absolutely the antithesis of that. However, through our strong business relationships and communications, we've been helping businesses to access the financial support available, as Merton Chamber have been doing as well. We are active participants in the Raise the Bar campaign, which I would all encourage you to get on board with, where we are encouraging for the upper threshold of 51,000 to be extended, because actually just through extending that to around 150,000, an additional 180 businesses in Wimbledon would be supported. That represents over 5,500 jobs, which is about 30% of the employment in town. So I would urge you to sign that petition and get behind the hashtag Raise the Bar campaign and sign that petition. We are also working heavily with a number of other sectors and instances where categories of businesses have not been included, and I'm sure some of the questions will come up to that at the moment. But there are a number of businesses that are in danger of failing if they do not receive that support. So I really would urge, I know that I've been in touch with Stephen Hammond regularly, and likewise with Stephen Allen Brittus on the discretionary fund, but I would also like to raise it to the Minister that this is a now issue for a lot of these businesses. They will fail if we don't get them support very soon. So we've also been supporting those businesses that have remained open and those that are now starting to open with very careful queue management and social distancing tools, whilst also promoting that they're open for business, albeit in a limited way, particularly for deliveries. We're working with national experts on delivering a recovery plan for the town centre so that it enables a safe and responsible experience for anybody in town in the future. Managing social distance, however, is going to be the biggest challenge for a town like ours, where relatively narrow pavements and lack of public space doesn't allow for easy movement. Pre-COVID, the office occupiers supported the public-facing business significantly with the lunchtime and after-work offer, but with fewer employees in town, there's likely to be a longer-term impact on footfall. So we are further honing our Shop Local campaign to encourage more residents to support their town, and so that's in development at the moment. We're here to support businesses along with Merton Chamber, so for all those Love Wimbledon bid businesses, do get in touch with us, talk to us about what your plans are. We do have a wealth of tools available to help you, and by working together, I'm sure that we can return Wimbledon to have a certain level of vitality that we have had in the past, and let's hope that we can work together to develop that. Thank you, Diana.
Thank you, Helen. And I think 2 points there that I'll go straight to the Minister on. The Raise the Bar campaign, are you able to give us an update on where that is with government? This is for other people. This is where in London, the 51,000 threshold, obviously because rent values are higher in London, the campaign is about raising that threshold to be relevant to London, where obviously there are some businesses in the retail, hospitality and leisure sector that fall just over that. So, you know, they're really struggling but actually aren't getting the help. So, Minister, is there any update on that you could give us?
Yeah, so, you know, I was talking about having to deliver these schemes. When you try and deliver such massive schemes at such speed and at such scale, you're always going to get hard edges. And so there's a lot of unintended consequences, people falling between the cracks. And you're absolutely right to talk about London. You know, so I keep hearing it as I go around London, virtually anyway, and for the fact that the rates bills are so much higher here. But yeah, they can be captured within the discretionary rates scheme. But basically, the grants that we've given to local authorities is meant to have a light touch from national government. So I basically said that there's an extra £617 million. And I say up to because we've basically allocated a lot of money and a number of local authorities, I can't remember Merton's figures, I don't have them to hand, but a number of local authorities have said actually they don't have as many businesses that qualify for the grants as they've got money. So they will already have, some will already have excess money, but they've also got extra money to spend as well. So primarily, what we were trying to do with that is to target businesses and shared offices, as I was talking about, regular market traders who don't have their own business rate assessments, B&Bs that pay council tax instead of business rates, and charity properties and receive charitable business rate relief which would otherwise have been eligible for small business rate relief or rolling rate relief. But on top of that, local authorities can also direct some of the money at businesses that they think are important, that are missing out. So I'm not sure that would take it to the number of business. I doubt it myself. It would take the number of businesses that Helen was talking about, but certainly the ones on the cusp. It would be up to the local authority to do so. I'd be interested to see where Stephen was talking about his squabble with Rob Jenrick, the Secretary of State, about becoming tough. And if on the council, if there's anything I can help with that, please do let me know, Stephen. Because in Bays, with the original grants, we actually did put a letter out to all of the local authorities saying that we will, although local authorities understand that the grants are public money, that they need to make sure that they're accountable, we wanted to make sure that we were getting the money out and they were getting the money out in good time. It's no point, as I say, getting out too late. So we wanted to, again, have a light touch on that. And we sent them a letter of reassurance a week ago to say that we would stand behind them as long as they just have a basic reasonable test. And I would expect the same in this discretionary grants as well.
Okay, thank you. And I think we've had around 4 questions around that. So we know there's been a big outcry from businesses that are have landlords where the landlord is paying the overall rates bill and they're therefore not eligible for any of the business rates grants. And the questions that are coming in are quite detailed. There's some around, for example, the amount of grant, would it be relevant to the space that those individual tenants occupy? I know this is being administered through the local authorities. I haven't had a chance to speak to any of the Merton Council officers on this yet. Is there anything that we know that the councils would know on how it will be administered? Because I think businesses will really be looking to how they get those applications in very quickly, and it does seem a very broad offer. So the devil is, like everything, in the detail, I think. So is Sarah, are you able to say anything on that? I know we haven't got the business rates team here. Sarah?
Hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. We found out about the discretionary fund on Friday. I know that there was corporate management were discussing the logistics of it yesterday. There is a business meeting this afternoon, business officers meeting, and hopefully we'll be able to understand how we can administer it going forward. So yeah, it's all very early on in the process, but we will attempt to get those grants out as soon as possible, as we have up to now. Yeah, I understand there is a sum of money left over from the original payment that was made to Merton, so we can use that once we've worked out the actual administration process. I think there will be an application process looking at the information we've got so far, but hopefully we can make that as simple as possible, and we will then use the business groups like yourself, Diana, like Helen and Graham and Claire, and our town champions to get that message to businesses to be able to apply for that grant going forward.
Thank you. And I think I was going to say, you know, if we set up another of these sessions in whatever the time is, 1 to 2 weeks, with all those people that you just mentioned, and obviously the relevant council officers, I think that would be helpful, because
Diana, can I just come,
yes,
can I
please,
just come in there?
Minister.
Just to follow on something Sarah was talking about getting hold, whether it's applications for the normal grant fund. Before you get to the discretionary fund, one of the reasons that some local authorities are a lot slower at getting money out is because they can't find, as I say at the beginning, the businesses. So anything, if you're not already plugged in, if anything you guys can do, your members can do. I've been on local radio up and down the country, putting appeals out to people. If they think they qualify for one of these loans, please do just get in touch with the local authority. Similarly, if you've got friends and family that you think are running a business and qualify, please do get out, because you know, Merton's obviously got some good figures there in London, as you say, third in London, but there's bound to be some more hard to reach businesses that have just not been able to find.
Yeah, Thank you, and I think that's certainly what we've been trying to do, and obviously more to do on that. So thank you on that. So just to summarise on that, more detail to come on that very new local discretionary grant that is really important for really micro businesses. We have another very specific question, but this is about English language schools, and I'm not going to go into the detail because I know both the Minister and Stephen Hammond are very aware of this, but this is also about, I think, where there are discretionary grants, where local authorities have discretion. So in this instance, some local authorities are supporting and others aren't. So Minister, is there any sort of levelling of this to support businesses that perhaps fall through because some local authorities aren't taking the same approach as others?
It's not something that's come across my desk at the moment, to be fair, this specific levelling. I did talk about the hard edges of any of these sort of schemes in the first place, but I'll certainly take it away. We've done it from central. We have, for central government, we have introduced a number of support measures for education, further education areas, and I know the question is bound to worry about international students and the lack of international students coming in, that are likely to be coming into the country anytime soon. And we do education so well around the world. I used to be trade envoy before I got this role in Thailand, Brunei and Burma, and the respect which so many Asian countries in particular hold for British education is immense, and so it's a massive export for us, but it's also attracts a lot of international students. So we've published guidance on temporary concessions for Tier 4 students and their sponsors online, and we're committed to further improving the student journey because we want to be able to keep this going.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think, can we suggest that very detailed question is taken offline, because I know it's really important, and that Jane from Wimbledon School of English is saying that normally they don't come under education, and these are the anomalies, I think, with some of the interpretations. So but it is a very specific question, so we will continue to take that forward. Got a few questions about coming out of lockdown, both for retail and for office-based businesses. We've talked about, Stephen Hammond referenced it as the dimmer switch, which I think, we're all getting to grips with. But there is, this detailed guidance on how social distancing is maintained, both within shops, restaurants, bars, but outside in a queuing system that Helen mentioned, when obviously narrow streets, how queuing systems coming out of stores and restaurants would sort of clash with each other, all the things around hygiene controls, the actual things about PPE and who should be wearing all of this. When, Minister, do we think that the more detail on this is going to come out?
So we are working on it now. So the last weekend we had a set of calls around, as I say, 7 different streams of types of workplaces. When we were getting to some of that granular detail that you were talking about, we were even getting down to air pressure in factories, whether that encourages stems the virus if you increase it or decrease it. And what happens to air conditioning in mothballed offices is the spread of the virus, and indeed, as someone raised it on the call, talked about the danger of Legionnaires if you've had a business whose air conditioning has been switched off for a while. Those kind of unintended consequences are all of the things that we need to capture in those conversations. So we've had those with businesses, business representative groups, industry, and the unions have all been involved in those conversations. We're working through that now, and we'll have a sense, I think, over the next few days. But the discussions have not been about the data. What we need to make sure that's going to be led by science. We need to make sure that the guidance is there for businesses to be able to gradually open up. Hospitality have been telling me for some time now, the pubs and restaurants, it's all or nothing for them for the reasons I said right at the beginning. It's difficult economically for them to half open. the retail sector have been telling me actually they need warning. What they need is they need as certainty and clear guidelines as possible, but they also need warning so they can start to ramp up. And what I've told them is that we had to react to this pandemic as it came on really, really quickly. We can start to respond now because the return to the new normal, as Stephen mentioned, is more down to us. The timing is more down to us. We have a little bit more control over it. So by getting businesses involved now in those conversations means that there should be few surprises for them because they've helped to shape those guidelines. So it is one of those watch this space moments, I'm afraid, like everything else. But it's getting more and more advanced day by day. It literally is moving at speed.
Lovely, thank you. And actually that takes me on to another question around the furlough scheme, because businesses are obviously highly dependent on this. It is something that is allowing businesses not to have to make redundancies. The government's already extended it once, so the question is it likely to be extended again? And particularly, is it likely to be made more flexible? So for example, as we come out, ease the lockdown rules, will businesses be able to bring people back on a part-time basis under furlough and sort of get back to business in that way?
Well, what I can say is that you are not the only person to have raised that, Diana. That's come on pretty well every call that I've had. Again, it's if you look back to when we started this process and introduced the job retention scheme, we thought it was quite flexible because we were basically saying, well, it's a minimum of 3 weeks. So you can furlough someone for 3 weeks, you can bring them back and then take them away again, etc., etc. But as you say, in the new normal, things may be different. So it's I can't tell you. It's sitting with the Chancellor. He has to weigh up the cost, deliverability, the complexity of such a scheme. But it's definitely something that's been raised time and time again.
Thank you. Well, I'll go on to my last written question and then we will open up for questions from the audience. So this is very much around the culture and arts sector, a really important and vibrant sector in this borough. So it seems that I'm going to read this because it says white-collar businesses seem to have transferred far better to working from home than the culture and arts sector, which has essentially ground to a financial stop along with hospitality and events. So despite the arts having the luxury of outputting online from home, their financial income as a result has diminished to almost zero. And what's the advice there really? And we also do have a lot of businesses that are in that supply chain as well. So it's not necessarily the theatre or the music venue, it's actually all of those in that supply chain. So any news on that?
Well, the Arts Council have launched a fund some weeks ago. I forget how much it is, but there is some financial support from them. But London in particular is a creative hub of the world, and we know how important in the boroughs. It's not just all about the West End. In the boroughs, the cultural offering, the arts offering is so important. That what makes our neighbourhoods a particularly special place to live, rather than just a place to live, rest and work sort of thing. You can enjoy yourself around as well. So it is something we need to protect. And I know, like the hospitality industry in particular, it's anywhere where people congregate effectively. They're the ones that are being hardest hit at the moment, and they're the ones that are toughest to bring back. So it's something that we're working really incredibly hard with people in the art sector to work out the best by doing it.
Good. Okay, thank you. Well, we've got lots of people in the audience from all different sizes of business, all different sectors. So I think the way that I'm going to do this is, because there's so many of us and we do have, a good 10 minutes here, is could you just write your name in the chat box and then we'll invite you to speak. I usually do it by a show of hands, but I've got 3 screens. So Councillor Welton, did you want to say something there, or you were doing an adjustment to your screen? I think you were. Okay, so let's see. I think Alex Wolf from Seahorse Nursery wanted to say something. If you unmute yourself, Alex.
Hi, thank you. Paul and Stephen, first of all, we are very grateful for the furlough scheme as a business. We're a children's nursery. But just a question on an issue about whether there could be some flexibility from HMRC. We, along with other businesses, have staff that started well before the 19th of March. So they started at the start of March, but not on February's payroll. As a result, we can't claim furlough for them. And I just wondered if there's any possibility of that being looked at. And we can obviously get pension records, pay records, customers and colleagues to prove that they were working well before that date. But this moment of time, whereas we've received furlough for 95% of our workforce, those people that fell into that category have been rejected. I was just wondering if there's anything the government could do regarding those people.
Sure. Well, we changed the date of eligibility to ostensibly help an extra 200,000 people. But clearly, as you say, there are still some people that are affected by that, Alex, and you've illustrated just some of them. One of the problems with moving the date further forward is the risk of fraud, and you described about you've got your pension records and these kind of things. It's then delivering that at scale. You know, what seems easy for you to provide in your example, if you scale that up by a few million, you get into quite a few issues. So that's not to say it won't happen. I can't, I'm not the Chancellor, but certainly that's the question that is to be answered.
If you want to get in touch with me directly, let's see if we can help you on that point. And one or two other people have come to me and I've written to HMRC on the point.
Brilliant. Thanks, Stephen. We will do. Cheers.
Thank you. Okay, now we have David Debussy from RTD Properties. If you unmute yourself, David, and speak. Thank you.
Yeah. Hi everyone. Obviously, I sent a question which has been answered. I think we let out offices here. We got over 20 companies here in South Wimbledon, and all these companies are different. They're different activities, from driving school, cleaning companies, building companies. They're all affected because they don't pay rates. They pay rates to our landlords. So most of them are giving now the notice to leave us. Obviously, they're affected by the business. They can't pay their rents. So I want to put some hope for them if this is something that will be achieved, and what time scale will that be achieved to this question?
Okay. Well, Darwick, thanks for your question. The discretionary grant fund is the guidelines are being written up now. It was launched as I think Sarah said last Friday, and so the guidelines will be with the local authorities any day now. So you should be able to get that quite quickly. And Merton's clearly been quick in delivering the main grant, so I have no doubt that they'll get these out in equally as good time. In terms of rents, I know if you're a landlord, it might be different, but for them, we've obviously given a stay that they can't be evicted in terms of rent demands. But also, what we are doing, we found that some landlords have moved to statutory demands and winding up petitions, and we're actually restricting those in legislation. That will take a few weeks to do, but it will be retrospective. So there's always been an issue in terms of landlord and tenant, where the balance of rights lies, and it's for decades it moves around the place. It's hard to get right, but in this point, we're just trying to get the balance particularly right.
Good, thank you. And I would say, Darwick, I think the council has a very good listing of what I would call managed workspaces in the borough. So actually, that's a very good way, isn't it, of communicating with those that manage the workspaces to get that message out to their tenants. So I'm sure that can be looked at as well. Right, we now have another question from Right at Home. I don't know if you want to come in, but you've written it here, so I'll say it. And this is about actually the care sector and whether they could move to be 0 rated, because obviously that's going to make a massive help for their cash flow. So, but that's about care homes and VAT liabilities. It's a very specific question again. Is there any response on that, Minister?
Well,
oh, Stephen, yes.
Yeah, I mean, several local care companies have written to me about this. I've written to both the Treasury and the DH as a moving to 0 rated as opposed to being exempt. I think I haven't had a full response yet, but I think what was encouraging was the removal of VAT on PPE for care homes. So I hope that's a step in the right direction. And as soon as we get a fuller response, I will obviously publish that and let people know. But I'm encouraged that the move made on that looks like the government is recognising that it would be a huge help to care homes to move them to 0 rated.
Yes, thank you. Okay.
Can I just come in?
Yes, come on in, yes.
Yeah, it's Andre from Right Home. It's not just for care homes. We are a domiciliary care provider. So we send people into people's homes to deliver care in the home. So it's for the wider community adult care sector, not just care homes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Understood.
Okay. Good. Okay, thank you. So we now have Eugene Scobola from Holiday Inn Express in Wimbledon South. Eugene, are you able to come in?
Hi there. I've just got a question. I'm in the hospitality industry, obviously, and as was mentioned earlier, we in a situation where it is about all or nothing with the social distancing. Running a hotel, the F&B, etc., is very hard to nigh impossible. My question just is around all the guidance regarding social distancing, the sanitation, the face masks, etc., etc. I haven't seen, and I'm obviously under correction, I haven't seen any evidence of how this is spread, what it is. Are there any real studies that we're basing this on? Because even the World Health Organization hasn't put out any evidence of actual real studies in the field under a microscope of this is what it is, this is how it spreads, this is what kills it, etc., etc. So are we not maybe going to all this effort without really understanding what we're up against?
Yeah, in terms of the way it's spread, I think there is some evidence that if you have COVID symptoms and you have face mask, it can help stop the spread of it. But if you're wearing a mask and you don't have it, you can still get it, frankly, because it's actually to do with hard surfaces. It's to do with the number of people you see walking around with that take their mask off to answer their phone. How often do you have to change your mask? Do you wash it? Do you throw it away? How do you throw it away? You go in any number of parks, you'll see some masks just thrown away. So you've got to use it properly if you're going to have it. But there is also an argument, and it comes back to something I think Diana said right at the beginning about transport and schools and the other things apart from workspaces, is some people get a sense of confidence to be able to use public transport again as we're starting to lift restrictions. Having said that, and that's fine if they, we don't want to necessarily mandate it for confidence, but if they do use a mask for confidence, they mustn't get overconfident. They get a false sense of security. So you're right that with the government's decision on whether people should wear masks and PPE out in the streets and in public, will need to be based on the best scientific advice. They could advise if Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, wants bus drivers and his staff to have masks, or then fine. But he can source them. He can go and get them. Any employer can source them and get them themselves. But there's no decision taken from the centre.
So you haven't seen any evidence, any studies that actually definitively proves that wearing, it's irrespective if it's a mask or etc. Because no, I haven't seen any evidence of how it's spread, how, at what risk, because I've got 3 colleagues, for example, I'll just give you 3 examples. They went for test, one person's tested positive, the husband and the 2 children, they live in the same home, they've been stuck in the same home for 6 weeks, but it hasn't spread to the rest of the family. So, and this is, I've got 3 occasions of this, plus my mom works in a care home and they haven't had PPE until last week, where people have died of COVID and she hasn't picked it up. Now, that is my question, is nobody knows. At the moment, it seems like a lot of guessing work around how it spread, etc., and a lot of opinions, but no real evidence of anybody actually looking under a microscope, taking a virus cell out of a person that's got it, testing it to see what it kills it, how long does it live for, etc., because people are basing this on, it's almost a thumbsuck, it seems to me. And that's my question, is what are we basing this on? Because there's a lot of should do this, could do this, and
yeah. Well, to be fair, Eugene,
a whole lot of things that nobody knows anything.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, Eugene, this is something that's a global situation that global scientists are working on, or scientists around the globe are working on, and that's why we haven't offered some advice based on mandating masks or anything like that, based on evidence that doesn't exist. It is emerging. And as I say, there is some sense of evidence that it can stem the spread for someone that has got it, but it's not so effective for those people that are walking around the streets with a mask on.
Yeah. Okay. We could talk for hours on this, couldn't we? And it is a question and questions in people's minds all of the time. But I really want to get through just 2 more questions before we wrap up. So we have one from Chiara Samela, which is about refunds to customers that have paid for services in advance, but obviously aren't receiving those due to lockdown, social distancing measures. So a really important cash flow item for many businesses. Is there a response on that? And then Chiara, you could come in.
Yeah, I am the Minister for Consumers as well, so it's one of my many roles. So the Consumer Credit Act still is in place, so people can, if you've got package travel holidays, which has been something that's been raised a number of times by consumers and by travel companies, you can have a 14-day customer refund. But obviously, on the scale that holidays have been cancelled, there's an issue about cash flow there. At the moment, though, the way that the EU rules are set up on that, unless they change, we are still in the implementation period, so it's unlikely that we're going to be able to legislate to change that. But credit card, if they bought their product or service on credit cards, then they can also apply to the credit card for refund.
I think there was a very particular issue here, Minister, for, say, smaller businesses where, say, people have paid for children's parties in advance or things like that. And obviously, it's an important cash flow issue to keep the liquidity in those businesses. And that's a real issue for the smaller businesses.
No, it is, which comes back to the starting point of all the schemes that apart from the job retention scheme, which is all about protecting jobs, everything else is pretty well about cash flow. So I would point you to the various loan schemes. I know it's not ideal for if you're wanting a swift and distinct answer, but the loan schemes are the best way of protecting cash flow at this time.
Yeah. Great. Okay. And then we've got one final question here from Tony Bashir, which is about business rates on the South Wimbledon business area, Lombard Road Industrial Estate. Is that about business rates in general or the grants? Are you there, Tony?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, it was hello everybody. It was a question with regards to a lot of businesses are getting business rate relief in the hospitality, leisure, retail sector, but a lot of the businesses, probably all of them, are in the supply chain, and business has fallen off the cliff. But we're still getting demands for business rates. A lot of the businesses there have a rateable value of over 51,000. So and these bills are for for many thousands of pounds a month, but there seems to be no relief for the people in those type of settings.
Okay, Minister, have you got? Sorry, just.
Yeah, no, I think we've covered some of that, but it's some Tony. I don't have an easy answer for you. I'll certainly take it away. Some of that may be covered within the grant scheme, the discretionary grant scheme, in terms of the type of business, but that's left to the local authorities. In terms of the size, that's the Raise the Bar campaign that you were talking about before, which is, I think, is a separate matter that we're. I know Stephen and others are working on.
Sorry, if I can just come back. The Raise the Bar campaign tends to be specifically for retail, hospitality and leisure, but it doesn't seem to address businesses on, like on Deer Park Road. For example, my property has rateable value of over 100,000. Several thousand a month being demanded in rent, but no relief available whatsoever from the council. It seems that they say, well, we are one of the businesses that have fallen through the cracks.
I think essentially the 51,000 was set because it was the support was aimed at small businesses that would struggle to get support elsewhere. Larger businesses have a little bit more scope to get support through civils and CL bills and these kind of schemes, but it was specifically a small business targeted scheme.
Okay.
I think just to come in there, Tony, we'll take it. I think if we could take that offline with Merton Council as well, and I'm sure Sarah will connect with you on that. But I think the point is well made that there are many businesses that are in, if you like, the supply chain, catering companies that are supplying major restaurants, and they fall outside the scope of all the help. And I think that's the key point there. So it's another sort of lobby to carry on with. But we'll connect you in with Merton Council on your specific issue. And I'm going to stop it there because we have run over time, and we do like to manage these things to time. We have covered an awful lot of ground, and I know there are many detailed issues, and I know some of you will have gone away from this disappointed, so please keep in contact with ourselves, Stephen Hammond as your local MP, all the three bids are here, so wherever your business is based, they will certainly do everything they can to represent your case as well. And let's work together, and obviously we are working, all of us, with Merton Council on that. So just to say that the Chamber will continue to be your trusted point for information, help and to connect you, so please keep in touch with us. And as I said before, we have lots of information on our website. We have resources there, as does Love Wimbledon and the council. We've been given the gov.uk connection there, and we have obviously in the audience as well many our accountants and lawyers and other businesses that are there to help you. Now, as we end, obviously a big thank you to the Minister, Paul Scully, to Stephen Hammond, to our council colleagues, to the Business Improvement District colleagues, and all of you for attending. And I'd just like to end really, because we can't really clap or anything. So what we are tending to do is to do group waves. And as we do that group wave, then we will cut off, and thank you all for participating, and we will distribute the recording, and we will be in touch soon. So thank you all very much.